Why did you decide to write this book?
Right. Well, I've always found German history really interesting, and I think it probably comes from opening up a historical atlas. And they are all the other countries in Europe are all shaded in nice uniform colours, and you look at the middle of Europe, and it's such a mess. And you think, well, how on earth why was it like that? How did they get on? How did they organise themselves? That's the kind of basic question I guess I've been trying to answer for most of my career. And I had the idea of writing this book for a long time, and yeah, it felt really good to finish it. I have to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a big book. I mean, if you're watching right now, you can see kind of the thickness of the book. But to be honest, like even though it's a big book, I mean, 500 years of military history, you can't. I mean, even just like some of these conflicts, people write books that are just as long, and so it seemed like such an ambitious project. Did that intimidate you to write 500 years worth of history in a single book?
Well, having you mentioned earlier on, I wrote the history of the Holy Roman Empire, so that was 1,000 years. So this seems slightly more manageable. But yeah, I wanted to do something that gave the whole broad sweep of this on its own terms. So we don't hear the story as a kind of teleological, inevitable march to the two world wars, and then we don't stop the story there. We actually carry on, and that was the whole point. It was to sort of, yes, that's extremely important, the two wars of the first half of the 20th century, but we need to put them into their broader context. And yeah, that was one of the purposes of doing it the way that I did.
Well, talk about some of the myths of German militarism. People often say about Germany and Prussia specifically that it was uniquely militaristic. Why was that not the case?
Well, I think it has. You're quite right. It has that image, and you say those words, Prussian militarism, and we have a certain sort of set of images come to mind. I mean, maybe we have Frederick the Great. We certainly have the sort of Pickelhaube helmets and the sort of image that, in fact, that the publishers chose for the front of the book, which is a painting, a patriotic painting of a battle in the war between Prussia and Austria in 1866, and then obviously we have all the hardware and so on, and steel helmet and the stuff from the two world wars, and that sort of that image is very dominant and it's very visual, and it conveys a sense that yeah, the Germans have been somehow uniquely warlike, and also somehow that they've been successful. And it's quite interesting that a lot of the books that cover this, conveniently stop the story, sometimes perhaps in 1943, not even in 1945. So, there's a more complicated story there, and it's understandable why we have that particular image. Because it is actually, when you scratch the surface, you realize just how complicated it is.